For 15 years, eHealth Initiative has brought together executives from leading healthcare and technology organizations to help transform the healthcare industry. eHi provides a unique environment where healthcare executives and experts from across the industry convene to identify innovative solutions. Solutions that address key issues in healthcare, such as interoperability, data access and use, privacy, and business and clinical motivators. Our members represent a large, complex, and dynamic field of leaders who have very different points of view. As part of our commitment to give everyone a voice in this debate, we're launching a new podcast series, eHealth Perspectives, where we interview C-level executives to share their personal and professional points of view on the most important topics facing the industry today. We help identify practical solutions that work. This podcast is one more way for eHi to bring stakeholders together. I hope you find the interviews interesting and informative, and I encourage you to come back often, as new interviews will be released every few weeks. You can provide feedback and suggestions for the podcast series by emailing us at info@ehidc.org. And join us on Twitter using hashtag eHealthPerspectives. Enjoy the series. So what do you consider the biggest challenge right now for healthcare providers, health systems?
You know, Jen, probably the biggest single challenge is the conversion from fee for service to payment for value. And how are we going to deal with all the new payment models and the different approaches needed to deliver better patient care?
And how does technology play into that?
So a lot of what we're working on is how do we measure value? And how do we engage with patients would be two big categories. In addition, how do we manage populations? How do we stay on top of a patient's care? So in order to have better surveillance of what's happening with our patients, how to communicate better with our patients, and how do providers work better together as a team to meet payers' needs, all of those require technology. Then layer on top of that regulatory changes associated with meaningful use, ICD-10, MACRA, all of the alphabet soup coming out of DC. It's a bit of a challenge for providers.
So you mentioned policy changes and regulations. If you could change one policy or one regulation or roll something back, what would you select? I mean, what do you think would make the greatest impact if you could have one policy change?
So, you know, hindsight is 20/20, but I'd make the argument that the meaningful use incentives that got electronic systems into practices did a lot of good. But especially as we moved into stage 2 and we're moving to stage 3, the requirements have become so prescriptive, where the focus has been on activity and meeting milestones and checking the boxes, as opposed to measuring outcomes and results from the use of technology. I think we can fix that. We shouldn't lose hope. But we do need to move to some new kinds of models around how technology is incentivized in practices.
Any suggestions?
Well, I think part of it should match up against the payment for value kinds of approaches. It's hard to measure outcomes. It's not been a core of a lot of the measurements that we've had, and it's the big unsolvable problem. But I think there's a lot of ways that we can show how we're using technology in our practices and in other practices that have a whole lot less to do with which number of checkoff boxes did a nurse or a physician check.
Can you tell people what value you get from the eHealth Initiative, coming to these events, participating? What do you get out of it?
So we had a discussion today that I thought encapsulated what's really great about eHi. There's a mix of pragmatism, people saying, look, we really need help on propagation of best practice, sharing what works, supporting each other, in part because, you know, this is a place where all of the stakeholders are at the table: providers, payers, vendors, advisors, policy folks, and we have a chance to actually solve problems. As opposed to talking at each other, we can talk to each other, which is useful. So that pragmatic, what do we do to solve problems today? And also a lot of appetite for innovation. How do we solve today's problems and new problems with new kinds of solutions? And I think we had a lot of energy in the room, even after 7 hours of conversation, because people are engaged in those questions.
If you had to describe the current state of healthcare technology in one word, how would you describe it?
Wow. I would probably say something like emerging. I'm the father of college-aged daughters who are trying to figure out how to be adults. And that process of adulting is something that I think our technology is going through right now. We're behind other industries like banking, retail, finance, entertainment, transportation.
And as the new board chair, what direction would you like to see eHealth go in the future? What's your vision?
So I think what I'd really love to see us do is to be equally engaged in Main Street medicine and Capitol Hill politics. And how can we really bring those two together? Because we need both sides to be represented to get to good solutions.